At this point in the race for the presidency, things look pretty good for Joe Biden, and for Trump, not so good. The Cook Political Report Electoral College ratings predict Democrats will get 308 electoral votes, meaning Biden doesn't even need to win any of the toss-ups to secure a win in the 2020 election. Analysis by 270 to Win echoes the one by Cook, with a consensus map that forecasts 278 electoral votes for Biden in the safe, likely, or leans categories. On their polls-based map, it's more of the same, with 291 votes for Biden without tapping into toss-ups. A less certain map by Real Clear Politics gives Biden 212 electoral votes, 215 for Trump, with a huge swath of toss-ups, accounting for 211 electoral college points. To win the White House, according to this projection, Biden would need to secure just 27% of the toss-ups. Currently, 538 gives Biden a 73% chance of winning the election, and just 27% for Trump. That's actually conservative compared to other forecasts. The Economist, for example, gives Joe Biden a 91% chance of winning the Electoral College. Still, I don't think I'm the only one who can't help but shake the feeling that we've seen this movie before. The Economist was likewise bullish on Hillary Clinton in 2016, releasing an article just prior to that election titled, "Hillary Clinton has got this. Probably. Very probably." 538 at the time agreed, giving Clinton a 71.4% chance of winning the election and 28.6% for Trump. Shortly after the election, they bragged about how accurate this prediction was. And indeed, that was accurate compared to outlets that gave Clinton odds of 90% or more. Among the worst was Huffington Post, which gave Clinton a 98% chance of winning and Trump a 1.7% shot. So while I'm going to construct an updated Electoral College prediction map in this video, I'm also going to encourage you to learn the lessons of the past. If you catch yourself not doubting the numbers, I do encourage you to ask yourself, why so certain? Let's begin constructing this prediction map by labeling states where there is no general election polling available. Generally speaking, we don't get good polling in states where the outcome is obvious based on historical precedent and current political trends. This means that unless pollsters are missing some very important changes happening in these states, their electoral votes are pretty easy to guess. Some states where there is no available polling, but the results will almost certainly favor Republicans, are Idaho, South Dakota, and Wyoming. While there isn't polling data available to back their solid Republican status, I don't think I'm going out too far on a limb to suggest that these three states are all going to vote for Trump. Some places where there isn't polling data available, but the results will almost certainly favor Democrats, are the District of Columbia, Illinois, Oregon, Rhode Island, and Vermont. Of course, a lack of polling data is not the only reason that you should expect that a state is solid for one candidate or another. There are other states that are historically not swing states and also are currently polling heavily on one side or the other. So I'm also going to label the following states as solidly Republican. Each of them have polling averages favoring Trump by more than 10%. Alabama, Indiana, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Tennessee, and West Virginia. Okay, no surprises there, I hope. By the way, you'll notice I'm using polling aggregations from 538. I know some of you might prefer RCP, but I assure you the numbers aren't significantly different when it comes to the broad strokes of things. And for some of the precise moves I'm going to be making later on, I actually need to be using the 538 aggregations to deliver consistency across my methodology, so bear with me on that. Now, the solid Democratic states, according to the same standards as we used for identifying solid Trump states, are these ones: California, Connecticut, Delaware, Hawaii, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York, and Washington. Now let's deal with three historically Republican states where the margins aren't so clear. In Alaska, Arkansas, and Nebraska, statewide polling is showing a rather tight race between Biden and Trump. All these states show Trump beating Biden by just 2 or 3 percentage points, which if taken seriously means that they should be considered as toss-ups. Frankly, I don't buy that, and the polling that exists is not sufficient to produce proper polling averages. For this reason, despite the rather thin margins currently shown in the polling for these states, I'm still going to label all three as likely Republican. Speaking of Nebraska, both that state and Maine have an unusual way of assigning their electoral college votes. While all other states in the union are winner-take-all, Nebraska and Maine each also assign one elector for the preferred candidate in each congressional district. The majority of these districts are fairly easy to predict. Nebraska's 1st and 3rd districts tend to go Republican, and Maine's 1st congressional district tends to go Democratic. But the 2nd congressional district in each of these states has a recent history of swinging from one party to the other. While current polling within each congressional district is rather scant, there is some polling now available. Current polling indicates a very slight lead for Biden in Maine's 2nd, so I'm going to label it as tipping Biden, just so we have a definitive answer here, but keep in mind this is still very much a toss-up. When it comes to Nebraska's 2nd, we've actually seen Biden leading by rather healthy margins in 2 different polls. Still not incredible evidence, but with a +9 polling average for Biden, it's enough that I'm going to label the district as leans Democratic. It is possible, in fact, that Biden is employing a classic Obama tactic here, chipping away that one district in Nebraska so that he'll win the Electoral College in the event of what would otherwise be a tie. Now, for every state on the map currently left in gray, the state either has some claim to being a historical battleground, and or the polling is currently favoring its candidate by less than 11%. We can therefore consider all of these states as plausibly in contention. By that, I by no means intend to claim that they are equally in contention though. Obviously, Montana and Colorado are far more predictable than, say, Wisconsin or North Carolina. But for all of these gray states, there is at least one reason or another to doubt a solid red or blue rating. We will now fill in these states using 538's polling aggregation, separating likely, leans, and toss-ups by consistent numerical standards. Toss-ups, whether tipping red or blue, will be any states where the margin between Trump and Biden is less than 5%. Leans will be any state where the margin is more than 5% but not more than 10. A state will be likely blue or red if that spread is more than 10 points. By these polling standards, we can consider Colorado, Maine, New Mexico, and Virginia as likely Democratic. We can also consider Utah as likely Republican. Florida, Michigan, Minnesota, Nevada, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin all lean Democratic. Kansas, Montana, and South Carolina all lean Republican. Now you'll notice already that things are going pretty well for Joe Biden. We are already seeing significant improvement over the past few months from when I first created an electoral college map projection for the 2020 election. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Finally, let's fill in the toss-ups showing in which direction each remaining state is tipping. Texas, Missouri, Iowa, Georgia, and Ohio are all tipping toward Trump by fairly different margins. With Missouri, it's a relatively strong 4.8 point spread. In Ohio, his lead is just 1/10 of a percentage point, which is about as unstable as it gets. Arizona and North Carolina are both tipping in Biden's direction. So there you have it. If all polling is 100% accurate and aggregated perfectly and does not change between now and election day, and if all these people identifying as likely voters are indeed equally likely to vote, and mail-in voting and voter suppression efforts and other imagined or real election rigging shenanigans do not occur, then this will be the election result in November. Biden will win 335 electoral college votes, and Trump will win 203, giving Democrats a decisive presidential election victory. But of course, those are some pretty big ifs. Of course, voter turnout is an important factor. Of course, some voters will change their minds. Of course, polls are not 100% accurate. Of course, factors beyond basic opinion polling can play a role in the election results. And of course, as I mentioned in the intro, we've seen this movie before. Going by the polls, sometimes mixed with some other less scientific analysis, many political pundits had extreme confidence that Trump would lose in a landslide in 2016. I myself certainly did not predict a landslide for Clinton. You can go back and check those videos for yourself, but like virtually everyone, I did think that Trump would be more likely to lose. Fortunately, now that 2016 is in the past, we can learn from it and get a good idea of just how much polling data can vary this far out in an election. We can compare the actual election results from the polling aggregations created by 538 at this time of the year in 2016 and apply the same changes to the current election data. Now, just to keep me honest, I'm going to rifle through all of these screenshots showing the polling averages calculated by 538 on August 24th, 2016 to serve as the counterparts for the polling averages I collected for this election on August 24th, 2020. But I will also show you this beautiful spreadsheet glamour shot showing the polling averages for both Clinton and Trump, as well as the spread favoring Clinton. So positive numbers here means in her favor, negative numbers are in Trump's favor. If you're having trouble remembering that and you're a Democrat, just remember that Trump is a very negative person. If you're a Republican, just picture the negative numbers as tremendous cuts to the estate tax. Next, on this similar looking and thus equally beautiful spreadsheet screenshot, we see the actual election results presented in the same way. I'm not going to show you screenshots to validate these figures. You can go anywhere like Wikipedia to certify that these are indeed the correct figures. Finally, we move on to probably the most beautiful chart you've ever seen in a YouTube video. In the first column, we have a repeat of the spread number you saw for the August 24th, 2016 polling aggregations by 538. The next column is a repeat for the actual election results spread in Clinton's direction. The middle column is the change from polling to election day results for Clinton. As you can see, it's negative right down the line, meaning in Trump's direction. Finally, in the next two columns, you can see the current polling for Biden in each of these states, and finally what the final election results would be if Biden's numbers slip by the exact same amounts as Clinton's did this far out from election day. As you can see, this does make some critical differences, flipping Michigan, Minnesota, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin from blue to red. So what happens to our election map if we apply the Clinton handicap to it? Well, here's our map that more or less just follows the current 538 averages, and here's what happens when we apply the changes based on the 2016 changes. As you can see, it's a dramatic enough adjustment to reverse the fate of the election. With the Clinton handicap in place, the expected election result is now 274 for Trump and 264 for Biden. Now, this projection has Trump beating Biden in a narrower electoral college spread than he beat Clinton by. That's actually surprisingly good if you look at this highly shocking set of charts from RCP. This is a graph of Clinton's average lead over time in the top battleground states according to RCP data. Here's the same for Biden and Trump now. And finally, here is the difference between 2016 and now. As you can see, Trump is actually at this moment in time doing better on average against Biden than he was against Clinton at the same point in that presidential race. Now, noting the spread in changes from polls to final results in 2016 should give us pause about being overly confident in our analysis of 2020 based on very similarly limited data. Still, there are likewise plenty of reasons to doubt that this adjusted electoral college map is any more reflective of what the actual results will be. By projecting the change into a new map, we can get a stronger idea essentially of how inaccurate the polls really can be this far out. But for this projection to end up being perfectly accurate, we'd have to assume that the exact same issues affecting the 2016 inaccuracies will apply again now, and in the same way and to the same degree. There's no reason to expect those things. Inaccuracies can, depending on their causes, very likely swing in both directions. And there's very little reason to suspect that history will repeat itself exactly. 2020 is a very different election year from 2016 for countless reasons. Not least among them is the differences in the candidates. Biden and Clinton have commonalities, for sure, but there are also plenty of differences in a number of respects. Perhaps more substantially, Trump himself is an extremely different candidate now than he was 4 years ago. Today, he is no longer an outsider insurgent. He has experience as president and also a record to scrutinize. A Trump presidency now is no longer an almost unimaginable oddity. It's what we've been living with for nearly 4 years. So you really should not be overly confident about Biden given the current polling advantage he enjoys. But if you're bullish on Trump and think he'll outperform the polls on election day by just as much as he did last time around, you too should probably ask yourself, why so certain?